Your airplane gives you the freedom to fly almost anywhere you want to go. With this freedom comes responsibility. The responsibility to know the requirements of the area in which you're operating and to ensure that you and your aircraft are properly equipped and certified to fly in that airspace. The sky over the United States is divided into various airspace categories. The two main categories are controlled and uncontrolled. Special use airspace and other airspace areas are additional categories. First, let's take a look at controlled and uncontrolled airspace. In controlled airspace, all aircraft operators are subject to certain pilot qualifications, equipment requirements, and operating rules which are specified in the regulations. In addition, you may be required to be in contact with Air Traffic Control, or ATC, while flying in controlled airspace. ATC may provide you with services such as traffic advisories, sequencing of aircraft, and radar separation. Radar services are improved by use of a transponder, which is an electronic device aboard the airplane that enhances your aircraft's identity on an ATC radar screen. If your aircraft is equipped with a transponder, regulations require you to use it whenever you fly in controlled airspace. You are also required to have a transponder with Mode C altitude encoding capability anytime you are flying at or above 10,000 feet mean sea level. This, however, excludes the airspace at and below 2,500 feet above ground level. The use of this equipment will be discussed in a later program. Controlled and uncontrolled airspace is classified using alphabetical designations based on the standards set forth by the International Civil Aviation Organization, commonly referred to as ICAO. Controlled airspace consists of those areas designated as Class A, B, C, D, and E airspace. Uncontrolled airspace is designated as Class G. Currently, there isn't any airspace in the U.S. meeting the ICAO definition for Class F. The classification of airspace is relative to the complexity of the operational requirements placed on the pilot and aircraft. With this in mind, let's take a look at Class A airspace. Class A airspace extends from 18,000 feet MSL up to and including 60,000 feet MSL. To fly in Class A airspace, you must hold an instrument rating, operate under an IFR flight plan, and be controlled directly by ATC. Now let's discuss the classes of airspace that you'll become familiar with while flying under visual flight rules. VFR sectional charts can be used to identify the various classes of airspace you will be flying in. The specific dimensions of most of the airspace classes are depicted on these charts. Class B airspace surrounds our nation's busiest airports. In Class B airspace, radar services are provided by ATC to separate all arriving and departing traffic. Although the shape of Class B airspace may vary to meet the specific needs of each location, the general design is a series of expanding layers. This shape allows arriving and departing airplanes to remain in controlled airspace as they travel between the airport and en route portion of the flight. To operate within Class B airspace, there are specific requirements that must be met. Prior to entering the airspace, you must get an authorization or clearance from ATC. This means your aircraft must be equipped with a two-way radio so you can communicate with ATC. In addition, your aircraft must have a transponder with Mode C altitude encoding capability. The transponder requirement extends out to 30 nautical miles from the primary airport and covers the airspace from the surface up to 10,000 feet MSL. To operate within Class B airspace, you must hold at least a private pilot certificate. There is, however, one exception to this regulation. Student pilots may operate within Class B airspace if they first comply with the training requirements listed in the regulations and have the appropriate instructor endorsement. Keep in mind that some Class B primary airports are so congested that takeoffs and landings by student pilots are prohibited. These airports are listed in FAR Part 91 and in the AIM. Class C airspace exists at designated airports where the volume of traffic is not as great as in Class B airspace. But ATC does provide radar services to all aircraft. This airspace usually consists of a core area or inner circle extending out 5 nautical miles from the primary airport, and a shelf area or outer circle with a 10-mile radius. The core area begins at the surface, while the shelf area starts at 1,200 feet AGL. Both have an upper limit of 4,000 feet above the airport elevation. Prior to entering Class C airspace, you must establish two-way communications with ATC and maintain radio contact while in the airspace. Your aircraft must also be equipped with an operable transponder with Mode C capability. This requirement extends up to 10,000 feet MSL. An outer area exists out to 20 nautical miles from the primary airport in association with Class C airspace. Although two-way radio communications are not required, inbound VFR pilots are strongly encouraged to contact ATC when flying in the 20-mile outer area. ATC normally provides radar services in this area to improve safety and aircraft separation. Another classification you need to know is Class D airspace. Class D airspace is located around airports that have operating control towers. The control tower provides air traffic control and weather reporting services to arriving and departing aircraft in the terminal area. The lateral dimensions of Class D airspace are normally based on the instrument approach procedures at the airport. Since this airspace often contains arrival extensions, the lateral limits vary from airport to airport. Normally, the ceiling of Class D airspace is 2,500 feet above the airport elevation. The ceiling may vary, though, due to requirements unique to each airport. Prior to entering Class D airspace, you must establish and maintain two-way radio communications with the control tower. At airports where the control tower is only operational at certain times, the airspace will be designated as Class D only when the tower is open. When the tower is not in operation, this area is referred to as Class E airspace. If there is no observer on the field to provide weather reporting service, the airspace will be designated as Class G. Two-way radio communications with ATC are not required in either Class E or Class G airspace for VFR flights. However, in those Class E and Class G airspace areas which have an operating control tower, you must communicate with the tower when you are within 4 nautical miles and at or below 2,500 feet AGL. There are also some airports where the instrument arrival extension does not require establishing radio contact with the control tower. In this case, the extension area is designated as Class E airspace. The Class E designation also covers the remaining controlled airspace and consists of several different segments. ATC services are provided to IFR traffic in Class E, and some services are available on request for VFR flights. One segment of Class E airspace is found around non-towered airports which have approved instrument approach procedures. The purpose of this area is to allow IFR traffic to remain in controlled airspace while transitioning from the en route environment to the airport. The base of this type of Class E airspace begins either at the surface or at 700 feet AGL. The lateral limits may vary and are depicted on sectional charts. In both cases, the vertical limit extends upward to the base of the overlying airspace. At airports where Class E airspace begins at the surface, weather reporting services are provided by an FAA-designated weather observer. At certain times, this service may not be available, and the airspace will then be designated as Class G. Away from airports, much of the Class E airspace begins at 1,200 feet AGL, and most of your flights will be conducted in this airspace. Federal Airways, also known as Victor Airways, are designated as Class E airspace. These airways allow you to fly from one location to another by radio navigation. These airways are normally 8 nautical miles wide and begin at 1,200 feet AGL. The low-altitude airway system includes the airspace up to, but not including, 18,000 feet MSL. Unless designated at a lower altitude, Class E airspace also covers the 48 contiguous states, the District of Columbia, and a portion of Alaska, beginning at 14,500 feet MSL and ending at the base of Class A airspace. It does not, however, include the airspace within 1,500 feet of the surface. The last letter designation for U.S. airspace is Class G, or uncontrolled airspace. Essentially, all airspace not designated as Class A, B, C, D, or E is uncontrolled. ATC doesn't have any responsibility or authority for aircraft operations in Class G airspace, and unless the area contains an operating control tower, there are no two-way radio communications or special equipment requirements. Although some segments of airspace we have discussed do not require communication or special equipment, it is still important to know their dimensions because of required weather minimums. Specific cloud clearance and visibility minimums have been established for VFR flights in both controlled and uncontrolled airspace classes. Let's take a look at controlled airspace weather minimums first. To operate VFR in Class B airspace, you must remain clear of clouds and maintain at least 3 statute miles flight visibility. You must also maintain 3 statute miles visibility in Class C and D airspace, but the cloud clearance increases to 500 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 2,000 feet horizontally. These same minimums apply in Class E airspace below 10,000 feet MSL. In Class E airspace above 10,000 feet MSL, though, the minimums increase. You must maintain 5 statute miles flight visibility and maintain a distance from clouds of 1,000 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 1 statute mile horizontally. Besides the basic VFR weather minimums, there are additional limitations when operating in the vicinity of an airport in controlled airspace. For example, to operate VFR beneath a ceiling within the lateral boundaries of controlled airspace, which extends to the surface, the ceiling must be at least 1,000 feet. In addition, within the lateral boundaries of the surface areas of Class B, C, D, and E airspace, VFR pilots cannot land, take off, or enter an airport's traffic pattern unless the visibility is 3 statute miles or better. These requirements give VFR and IFR pilots the necessary visibility to see and avoid each other during approaches and departures. When the weather is below these VFR minimums, you may be able to obtain a special VFR clearance from ATC. This type of clearance allows you to take off and land as long as you have 1 mile visibility and can remain clear of clouds. Keep in mind, a special VFR clearance cannot be issued at night unless you have a current instrument rating and your airplane is equipped for instrument flight. In addition, special VFR clearances are not issued to fixed-wing aircraft during the day or night at some of the nation's busier airports. A listing of these airports can be found in FAR Part 91. The lowest weather minimums occur in Class G, uncontrolled airspace, during the day. When flying at or below 1,200 feet AGL, regardless of your MSL altitude, You must maintain a flight visibility of 1 statute mile and remain clear of clouds. During the day, when flying higher than 1,200 feet AGL, but less than 10,000 feet MSL in Class G airspace, the flight visibility remains at 1 statute mile. The cloud clearance increases, though, to 500 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 2,000 feet horizontally. At night, in Class G airspace, the same cloud clearance minimums apply, but the visibility increases to 3 statute miles below 10,000 feet MSL. These same minimums also apply to any airspace above 10,000 feet, that is within 1,200 feet AGL. There is one exception to these weather minimums in Class G airspace. You may operate an airplane in the traffic pattern at night with a minimum visibility of 1 statute mile. However, you must remain clear of clouds and stay within 1/2 mile of the runway. Finally, if you are operating more than 1,200 feet AGL and you are at or above 10,000 feet MSL in Class G airspace, your weather minimums increase. Here, you are required to maintain 5 statute miles flight visibility and remain 1,000 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 1 statute mile horizontally from clouds. Airspeed restrictions have also been established for operations in both controlled and uncontrolled airspace. Unless otherwise authorized, you cannot operate an aircraft faster than 250 knots when below 10,000 feet MSL, regardless of the type of airspace. When operating below 2,500 feet AGL and within 4 nautical miles of the primary airport of a Class C or D airspace area, the maximum airspeed decreases to 200 knots. This 200-knot limitation also applies to aircraft operating in the airspace below the lateral limits of Class B airspace and in a VFR corridor designated through such airspace. Another major classification of airspace is called special use. You are required to either avoid these areas or to abide by certain limitations within them. For example, flight within prohibited areas is not allowed because of national security or other national welfare reasons. In contrast, flight within a restricted area is not prohibited, although certain limitations may be imposed due to hazards in the area. To fly through this area, you must receive authorization from the restricted area's controlling agency. Warning areas are over coastal and international waters and cannot be designated as restricted. However, the activities within these areas may be as hazardous as restricted areas. Military operations areas are blocks of airspace in which military training or other military maneuvers are conducted. VFR pilots should exercise extreme caution when flying within an active MOA. An alert area usually contains a high volume of pilot training or an unusual type of aerial activity. Flight within alert areas is not restricted, but you are urged to exercise extreme caution and watch for other traffic. Controlled firing areas contain activities which, if not conducted in a controlled environment, could be hazardous to non-participating aircraft. However, when a non-participating aircraft is spotted approaching the area, all activities are suspended. The final grouping we will look at is designated as other airspace areas. The first type of airspace that falls under this classification is called an airport advisory area. There are 3 different types of advisory service available at select airports. The FSS provides a local airport advisory, or LAA, service to all participating aircraft within a 10 statute mile radius at airports that have a flight service station but don't have an operating control tower. Although your participation is not mandatory, the flight service station gives valuable information about known traffic, wind direction and velocity, the altimeter setting, and the favored runway. Remote Airport Advisory, RAA service is provided within 10 miles of busy general aviation airports that do not have an operating control tower, or FSS, located on the airport. The Airport Facility Directory lists RAA locations and times of operations. The third service available in an advisory area is Remote Airport Information Service, RAIS. This service is used for short-term special events like medium-sized fly-ins to provide pilots with known traffic updates and special instructions. Service notification is given through a NOTAM D. Military training routes are also defined as other airspace. These routes are developed for the purpose of conducting low-altitude, high-speed military training. You should be aware that operations in excess of 250 knots may occur on military training routes below 10,000 feet MSL. You should also be familiar with Terminal Radar Service Areas, or TERSAs. TERSAs have been designated at certain Class D airports to provide radar service for participating VFR aircraft. You are encouraged to contact ATC, but it is not mandatory. The dimensions of TERSAs are depicted on sectional charts. Temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs, also come under the category of other airspace. TFRs are issued by NOTAM when necessary to protect persons or property on the ground or in the air, maintain air safety, or prevent congestion around aerial demonstrations or major sporting events. TFR NOTAMs are typically issued 30 days prior to the event and typically include effective dates, times, and geographic features or coordinates of the restricted airspace. Other types of airspace in this classification are parachute jump aircraft operations and flight limitations or prohibitions. The days of having the sky all to yourself may be gone, but your freedom is not. The different categories of airspace and the regulations that go along with them are designed to make flying safe. By understanding the requirements of each type of airspace, you'll soon realize that you have a great deal of freedom to operate in the national airspace system.